All right, we're on the record. Just a housekeeping matter. One of the jurors was late, and so the jury video is still playing. Should be done in a few minutes, and then we'll bring him in. But I also thought I'd take this opportunity to note that in various discussions, the rules of general practice require that if race data is going to be released from jury records, that it be by court order. I so order. But only for, and we'll follow this up with a written order, but only with jurors who are actually seated. I would note for the record that various media outlets have been trying to describe the race of various jurors, and I have described the racial composition of those who are seated so far as part of Batson challenges. I think it is a much better practice that if, instead of making the media guess, sometimes inaccurately, to simply disclose how that person self-identifies. We will not be disclosing any other race data for jurors who have not been reached or who have been excused for one reason or another. So, like I say, we'll follow that up with a written order, but just so everyone is aware. And the ages, we've been giving age ranges, just 20s, 30s, 40s. That's straight out of the questionnaire, which is a public record. Cyber? You can hold off for a second. I got to do the group. You take a spot wherever you'd like. All right. Be seated. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, excellent. If not, we would be able to provide hearing assistance devices. Well, my name is Pete Cahill, and I am one of the judges of the district court, and you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all prospective jurors which must be answered under oath. First of all, thank you for filling out the questionnaire and returning it to us. That it was a great help. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide full and complete answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. Those questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. After the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what we call cause. In either case, it does not mean that you're not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense in any question that is asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences that you've had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. Now, the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. In the normal course of a trial, charges may be added or subtracted from these charges, but those are the charges for you to consider today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. And now I'm going to ask the participants to introduce themselves to see if you are acquainted with anyone. For the state first.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Slisher. I represent the state of Minnesota.
Joshua Larson, also with the state.
Erin Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
All right, and Mr. Nelson, if you'd introduce yourself and your client.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Nelson. My assistant, Amy Voss. We represent the defendant, Derek Chauvin.
Thank you. Anyone on the panel acquainted with anybody in the courtroom here that just introduced themselves, or anybody who is also present? Okay, I'm seeing all people shaking their head no. There are other people who might also appear for the state, including Assistant Attorney Generals Matt Frank, Jerry Blackwell, Attorney General Keith Ellison. Does anybody know any of those people? Or anybody who works at the Attorney General's office? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. You were given a copy of a list of potential witnesses. Please review it before you are questioned individually. You're going to be asked if you know anyone on the list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do during jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him, or because he has been arrested, or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order In order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial, unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given their testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect. But in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, their relationship to the parties, ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, manner, age and experience, frankness and sincerity or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in the light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are certain things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, lawyers or witnesses or spectators. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, or witnesses do not speak to you. They know it would be improper to contact you during trial and will confine themselves to a brief greeting. The only exception is you will have contact with them during the jury selection process. Now, during the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, but that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access such social media tools, but please do not publish any information about this case or your thoughts about this case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, or which might reveal your identification. In that case, I would specifically order the audio not to be broadcast so it's only available to those who are in this courtroom. In that case, you still will have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. Now, with the exception of juror number 51, who can remain in that juror's seat, we'll have you wait in the other courtroom again until it's your turn to be questioned. While you're in the other courtroom, please keep in mind all of our precautions against COVID, including keeping 6 feet apart, keep your masks on. I do this only during the instructions in order to be able to, so you can hear me, otherwise you will have contact with me with my mask being worn. So with that, feel free to use all the hand sanitizers and wipes you find in there as well. And juror 59, please remain behind. The other two, please go with the deputy. Okay. Great. And juror 59, I think you expressed some concerns about COVID. Is that correct? You can stay right there, actually, because I'm going to get you the wireless mic so that we can address those concerns.
Oh, okay.
As I understood it, our jury manager indicated you might have some special concerns about COVID. Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
I am very concerned about COVID, but I didn't come in with specific
Okay.
requests. No.
So you're not. Do you feel comfortable with the precautions we've taken?
Sure.
Okay. Then what I think I'm going to do is, just to make sure that you're fine with it, I'd have you sit in the witness chair. Would that work for you?
Sure.
And I will keep my mask on, and we have plexiglass between us. So you can just bring that up with you.
Where do you want me?
Right in the witness chair there. There we go. Actually, you can just give that to me, and I'll take it from here. Thank you. All right. So we have plexiglass between us. I'm going to continue wearing my mask. Up to you whether or not you want to wear your mask, because we have plexiglass between us, but also between you and the attorneys, who have another layer of plexiglass when they question you from the lectern there. So if you wish to take the mask off, feel free. If you want to leave it on, also feel free. And I'll probably have you pull a little close to the microphone so we can make sure we can all hear you. And before I turn it over to the attorneys for questioning, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you'll truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I will.
All right. First of all, you filled out the questionnaire, and it looks like you gave it a lot of thought.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. It gets us, it gives us significant progress in moving forward. Is everything on that questionnaire true?
Yes.
All right. Any changes or additions to the questionnaire that you can think of sitting here right now?
No.
All right. Because we know that you filled it out back in December or January.
Correct.
And it happens a lot that people on reflection realize they said something that was inaccurate, or they forgot to include something, or maybe even the opinions that they have held have evolved. In any case, just to give you an idea how that dynamic plays out is, say whatever is honest as you sit here right now, even if it conflicts with what's in the questionnaire. Okay?
Sure.
The most important thing is that we get your honest opinion about things, and more information about you. Now, the attorneys will probably ask you specific questions, but since it was so long ago, they'll probably also read your answer back to you just to refresh your memory, because it's been a while. So far, we've only had one juror who actually kept the copy of their questionnaire, so we don't anticipate that you reviewed it before you came today. The questionnaire also advised you not to read any articles or watch any media related to the case. But as we have found in the 2-3 months since, you might come across some information inadvertently. See a headline or see a quick blip on the news, something like that, that gives you more information. Or even a friend talking to you about the case, and we kind of put you in the constraint of not being able to say, well, I'm a potential juror, don't say anything. Have you been exposed to any information since you filled out the questionnaire until today? Even like a headline?
Certainly.
Okay. And what do you recall the substance of what you've been exposed to?
Just a lot of coverage on the protests. A lot of the concerns about people's safety. A lot of talk on the radio about the case being postponed, the change in the verdicts. I mean,
okay. All right. Do you say verdicts? You mean the charges?
The charges. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Anything about that specifically? Any that you can recall? Any details?
Not off the top of my head. I
Okay.
mean,
Anything related to the parties, the attorneys, any pretrial matters, related civil litigation, anything like that?
well, I mean, I guess I wasn't under the impression that I wasn't supposed to listen to anything.
Okay.
I didn't go out looking for stuff, but
Right.
when the radio in the car and they're talking about stuff and changing topics, I'm not turning the channel necessarily. So,
Sure.
I
Anything
mean, not a
that-
great detail. I mean, nothing off the top of my mind that I can just give back to you verbatim or anything.
Okay. And how recent was some of this stuff that you may have been exposed to? Just
Talk radio every day on my way
Okay.
to work, I guess.
okay. All right. The bottom line is everybody's been exposed to some information about
Yes.
this case. The question is not have you been exposed, it's can you take what information you may have learned from the media, which may or may not be accurate, and put it aside and decide this case just on the evidence you hear in this courtroom. And I know you expressed some concerns about being able to do that. And I'll tell you what I tell all the other jurors, which is if that's your honest opinion and you can't put it aside, can't unring the bell, so to speak,
Yeah.
perfectly legitimate position if it's an honest one. So what do you think?
I think it's going to be really extremely hard. I work at a school with BIPOC faculty and students, and we're working with DEI and justice work on a daily basis. It's a huge part of who I am and what I think about on a day-to-day basis. I've heard incredible testimonies from my colleagues and students about the way they've been treated, about not only by police but giant institutions. I mean, I'm in the middle of it. I'm doing it every day. This is my work, and so what can I say? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I of course I'm an educator, so I can listen, and I'm not going to purposely do anything, to break the law or perjure myself or anything. I'm not looking to do that, but yeah, I'd be a horrible candidate, I think, because of what I do. I couldn't go back to work and look at my colleagues and students, I don't think, after this, no matter what happens, and feel like my life hasn't been changed somehow permanently. I also want to let you know that on my way in, I was asked for my ID by a police officer, and he held it up in front of his iPad and looked at both sides. So my name has been compromised, in my opinion, and
Okay.
I'm extremely unsettled about it. I can't even stop shaking.
Okay. Well, I can tell you the reason why they did that is to make sure that nobody passed their letter with the number, because we are very concerned about your privacy.
Well, yeah, a police officer looked at my ID and knows my name, and that's a big problem for me.
Understood.
It's a very significant detail, considering that the case is against another police officer.
All right. Fair point. Let me just ask you straight out. Do you think you could presume the defendant innocent? And not try, but actually could?
No, I'm
Okay.
almost sick to my stomach right now.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to alleviate that because I'm going to excuse you from this panel.
Appreciate it.
And so if you could give the paperwork to the deputy on your way out, but thank you for being open and honest with us about
Yeah.
your feelings. So, all right, thank you. And just for the record, I think all the attorneys are aware that the deputies on entry into the building are checking IDs to match them against the number. I doubt if it would happen, but we don't want people passing their letter with the appropriate paperwork to someone else and just coming in and saying they are juror number 59, for example. So that's the reason for the ID check. And they're not keeping those names, they're just verifying it with our jury manager. So, all right, this will be juror 60. Yep. Have a seat right here. All right, good afternoon. You are juror number 60, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Just so you're aware, we have plexiglass between us, plexiglass in front of you, and also in front of the attorneys. And we are staying 6 feet apart, and I'm going to keep my mask on. Bottom line being, if you would like to remove your mask for comfort, or if we need to perhaps hear you a little more clearly, I'm going to leave that up to you. Okay? So whenever you wish, if you wish. I'm going to swear you in first so that all your answers are under oath. So raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
Okay. All right. There are some matters that actually I think we're going to deal with more privately, but I'll get to those in a little bit. First of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and that really helped us because it gives us a lot of information about you to start with. Question I have for you, is everything true on that questionnaire?
Yes.
All right. Anything you need to add or subtract, add to?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to move a little closer to the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
The microphone doesn't move very well. That's the unfortunate part. Okay, that should be fine. Sometimes in reflection, because you filled that out back in December or January, we know that in reflection you might realize there are things to add. And generally, unless you have something right now, it might come up later. The attorneys might ask you a specific question and even read back the answer to you so that you can recall a little better.
Mm-hmm.
And again, feel free to change, add. If it's a different answer, it's not going to get you into trouble because this is the dynamic of filling something out and then having 3 months to think about it. So the bottom line on all this is you're not supposed to read any articles since you filled out the questionnaire, but you may have gotten some information. To be honest, some of the information you have, I think you may be thinking of a different case. But nevertheless, whatever you heard outside the courtroom, you have to put aside if you're a juror and decide the case just on the evidence you hear in the courtroom. Do you think you could do that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you may have formed some opinions, some of which you've expressed in your questionnaire. Do you think you could put aside any opinions you have and decide the case just on the evidence in the courtroom based on the law that I give you at the end of the case?
I will do my best.
Okay. The attorneys might press you a little bit more on that about do you think you can actually, for example, be impartial? But we'll get to that in a little bit. So I'll just let you think about that. Did you recognize any witnesses who were on that list that were given to you?
No.
All right. Finally, almost finally, we told you not to read any articles about this case in the questionnaire, but it's been roughly 3 months. Is there any information that you've acquired inadvertently? See a headline, and it could be about the case specifics, it could be about the parties, it could be about pretrial matters, it could be about related civil litigation, anything about that?
I don't recall any.
Okay. And you did note that you really don't watch the news much because you don't like the controversial stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. The length of trial is estimated to be about a month once we start on March 29th. What are your thoughts on that? Is that doable?
I would have to be here for an entire month, every day, or?
Pretty much.
That should be fine.
Okay, and then overnight, probably if deliberations go more than a day. Because during deliberations, you'll be kept together as a jury, put up in a hotel, that type of thing. Can you make that work for?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there is a matter that you noted in your questionnaire that might be appropriate to talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to order under the rules that this is particularly sensitive matters to discuss and order that the audio be cut, but I'm also going to ask the spectators to step out And so if you could step out just for this part of the proceedings. Our technician who controls the audio and video will remain in the courtroom along with the attorneys and Mr. Chauvin, but we're going to have everybody excluded, and now audio is off. So we are back on audio. You can come back now. All right. Juror 60, thank you for answering those questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson to inquire further. Regarding juror number 60, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, sir. I am going to ask you a few general questions to get to know you a little bit better. And then after we go through those questions, I'm going to focus on some of your answers in the questionnaire that you provided. Again, we understand that it was quite some time ago that you filled this questionnaire out. and we're not trying to trick you. I'll actually read what you wrote in certain instances, okay? So if you and I were to meet in a different circumstance, at a party or a social event or some other place, what are a couple things that I would know or I would learn about you after that conversation?
Probably the general stuff, like what do I study, what do I do, hobbies perhaps.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you, you've got a very soft voice and I'm kind of hard of hearing. If you could just talk a little closer into the mic.
Sorry, yeah.
No, that's okay. Thank you. So you said kind of that you like to study, what your hobbies are, and I missed the last part.
What do I like to do? I don't remember myself. It's
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think, as I recall from your questionnaire, you're planning on going to law school in the future?
Yes.
Okay. And you're in your undergraduate work right now?
Correct.
Okay. When you received this questionnaire and you learned that you were a juror in this potential case, did you know much about this case when you got this questionnaire?
Not really, no.
Okay. I mean, did you have any reservations or concerns about being a juror in a high-profile case?
Yes, a bit of reservation for sure. I tend to avoid controversial things like this, but inadvertently, you come across people who talk about it in a certain way, and people have strong opinions about it. So I do have some, doubts.
Okay. So you said that you try to avoid controversy or controversial topics, and is that what you said?
Yes.
And so you had some reservations about being on a jury in this particular case because just of how you are as a person.
Right.
Okay. So in your personal life or professional life or in any way, do you ever remember a situation where you were called upon to resolve a conflict between two other people?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. And how do you approach a situation like that?
How? Well, I guess, so to give you an example, I'm the oldest of 3 children, so most of my, I guess, like when I said yes, I'm thinking mostly that I'm like the judge between my 2 younger siblings.
Okay.
I guess, I try to see it how they would because I was, in their shoes, so I try to sympathize and empathize and, try to come to a compromise, I guess.
Okay. So you try to find some common ground between your 2 younger siblings, listen to them, and sympathize with what they may be feeling about that situation?
Right, because most of the end goal of those disputes is normally to get them, right, to calm down and stuff.
Okay. So if you were a juror in this particular case, there may be controversy, or disagreement between 2 of the other jurors. So kind of taking it out of the younger siblings into a broader context or this situation, how do you think you would approach that disagreement between 2 of your fellow jurors?
I think it'd be pretty different. Maybe I misspoke. I don't avoid controversy because I'm avoiding it, but it's rather I don't care for it. Like the status and media and the surrounding a case doesn't make it any or less important, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense.
So, of course, if you're wondering if in a tense situation would I shy away because I'm avoiding that controversy because I don't want a confrontation, I don't believe that's the case.
Okay.
That shouldn't happen.
Okay. And so if you had a situation where 2 of the potential jurors, right, two groups of the jurors, there's one group that is looking at a piece of evidence and saying this evidence is the most important thing that we have to look at during this case. But then the other group is saying that's meaningless, it's irrelevant, right? How do you approach kind of that controversy?
I will probably start by finding common ground, make say that both sides have a point, right? And then sort of go into why each side is making the case that they are, and then sort of, and then take a, sort of figure out a new direction, I guess, from that. But I think it would start from finding sort of common ground to help one side understand the other, right?
Okay. Now, if you were to be the juror who is looking at this piece of evidence, right, and you're saying this is the single most important piece of evidence, and there's a whole group of people behind you disagreeing with you, how do you deal with that?
I would probably stand my ground. I would try my best to convince and sort of make my case. And if I'm convinced by theirs, then I will be. But
so you would be willing to re-examine your own views about evidence?
I would, but not because of pressure alone, but depending on the merits of the argument, of course.
Sure. So you would not give up simply to reach an agreement?
Oh, no, yeah.
And you understand ultimately that one of the principles of law that applies here is that all 12 jurors have to unanimously agree in a verdict of either guilty or not guilty.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, how about, can you think of a situation, again, maybe it's your younger siblings or something else, but you have two people telling you a story about a single event and they're completely different. And you have to decide which of those two people is telling the truth about the situation. How do you approach that analysis?
I probably start by analyzing their motives, if they, what reason, what they have to lie, the positions they're in, what could they lie about if they wanted to, and what reasons they might have, to lie, right? Because every person's different, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I would probably start judging based on the person.
So what the motivations that they have to tell the story.
Right.
That's what I heard you say?
Yes.
What about other information that may affect that story? How would you look at that?
Well, facts come first, right? So, of course, it has to match up with what actually we have, right? The facts. So. But further than that, if it matches up and it's just as likely one or the other, there's two accounts of one piece of fact, then that's how I would go about it.
Okay. Yeah. So start with the facts, and if they're both kind of telling similar stories, then go to the motivations they may have to disagree?
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Can you think of a situation in your personal life or your professional life or your educational life where you were just 100% convinced that you were right and it later turned out you were wrong?
Yeah, it happens.
Sure. And how do you deal with that? Are you the type of person that looks at that as a learning experience to apply to future situations, or do you kind of just brush it off and say, oh, I made a mistake?
Yeah, I love being wrong because
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what.
You may be the first person I've ever heard say that. And for law school, you're going to have to rethink that. All right. If you were to at the end of the case, if you were a juror in this case, Judge Cahill will give you the law that you need to apply. It's your job is to listen to all of the facts, kind of what you've talked about, listen to both sides, and ultimately apply those facts to the law as the judge gives it to you. Would you be able to follow the law even if you believed the law was wrong or should be changed?
Yes.
So I'm just going to follow up with a few questions on your questionnaire, sir. The first question asks what you know about this case based on media reports. And what you say is you tend to stay away from controversial news, that all you know is vaguely that 4 police officers went into Mr. Floyd's house and shot him. I hear things like the girlfriend called the police and Mr. Floyd was armed, but I always assume these are just biased rumors. Is that what you believe to know about this case?
I don't believe I know those things. That's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I were to tell you that like none of those facts happened in this case, would that surprise you?
No.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you just honestly have kind of really avoided this whole everything that's going on?
Correct.
Okay. I believe that with respect to, you were asked a couple of questions in terms of your general impression of my client, the defendant, and the Mr. George Floyd, who was the alleged victim in this case. And you responded both that you have neutral general impressions of both, and what you wrote was, I believe most of what I've heard, seen, or read isn't 100% true, especially coming from other people who might be impassioned by the case. Is that what would you stand by that statement?
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah.
Have you formed any opinion as to the actions of Mr. Chauvin?
No.
You were asked a question about whether you believe the community has been negatively or positively affected by the events that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since George Floyd's death. And you wrote that you believe the community was negatively impacted in terms of inciting the riots, not the peaceful protests, which also did take place. So what would be the difference between the riots and the peaceful protests that took place, in your opinion?
Well, the difference is one was violent and one was not. And what I meant further by that answer is not that the case is negatively causing these things, but people who people perceive it to be the cause of these things and then did those things.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like, it's not like the case ought to sort of cause the riots or whatever they did cause, but people sort of took that into their own hands and did it anyway.
Okay. You were asked a question whether you or someone close to you has ever helped support or advocated in favor of or against police reform, and then asked to explain. You wrote, "People talk all the time and often like sharing their opinions without being asked to. I'm sure numerous people have said such things regarding police reform to me." Are there any specific conversations you had with friends relevant specifically to the concept of police reform? Okay.
No, because the reason I said that is because I've been on campus, so that's why college campuses tend to be a rather liberal ground for.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're aware of things that are happening on your school's campus, and you see certain things happening, but you've not necessarily engaged in those conversations yourself.
Yes.
That's fair to say?
Yes.
You were asked a question whether you have personally seen the police use more force than was needed, and you answered no, but you said, "I haven't seen in person, but have seen some videos online where more force was used."
Yes.
Are you referring to any videos of this particular incident?
No.
And I believe you said that you have never seen any videos pertaining to this incident.
No, I have never.
There was a page in the questionnaire where there were several sort of broad statements, and you were asked to rank your opinion from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Do you vaguely or generally remember those? I'm not asking you to recite them. Do you remember doing that?
Very vaguely.
Okay. I just want to ask you a couple of questions about your responses, and maybe that'll help trigger your memory. Okay. One of the statements is, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you strongly agreed with that. Can you explain what you were thinking, or why you strongly agreed with that statement?
I don't have any personal experience per se, but I think most of it is formed by just my surroundings. Given that I'm a student, I am surrounded by people of my age, and my demographic tend to be very liberal. And I have taken some sociology and anthropology classes where these things were discussed in such a way that would have formed these opinions. But it's not a belief that I have fostered myself, if that makes any sense. It's not because I have any sort of strong root reason to have that belief.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
There is a statement that reads, Minneapolis police officers are more likely to respond with force when confronting black suspects than with dealing with white suspects, and you somewhat agreed with that. Why did you choose that?
The reason for the difference in answer, I'm less sure about the second one, is because the second one's way more specific. So because I don't know much about the actual statistics or have any experience with that, I'm less inclined to agree. Whereas the first statement is sort of like, it's vague, it's general. That's why the answers are the way they are.
There was a statement that said, I do not trust the police, and you somewhat agreed with that. Why would you somewhat agree with that?
For the same reason in the first question, I'm just surrounded by an atmosphere of distrust towards the police force, but it's not a belief that I foster myself, and it's not something that I will hold strongly to, simply because it's, do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's when you realize it's just the way it is, you just say it, but then you don't know if you actually believe in it.
Sure. Kind of finding your way on your own, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you that. I mean, you kind of referenced being on campus and being surrounded by a certain viewpoint, and I'm not coming out and asking if you agree or disagree or any of that nature at this point. I guess my question is, we're doing our best to obviously maintain your anonymity during this jury selection process and throughout the course of the trial. But at some point, your name may be, I have no idea when, but it may be released to the public. If you were to be identified publicly, how would you take that back to your campus and have conversations with your fellow students about that?
What do you mean how I would take it?
I mean, there are two possible outcomes here, right? One is a guilty verdict and one is a not guilty verdict. And you've sort of kind of indicated that the people that you go to school with tend to have a more liberal bias or perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And let's assume, for the sake of this hypothetical, that the jury returned a not guilty verdict in this case. Would you first acknowledge that's a possibility?
Yes.
And now you're back on campus. You've been identified as a juror in this case who voted to find Mr. Chauvin not guilty. How would you engage that how would you have that conversation with your students? Would you be concerned about having that conversation?
I wouldn't be concerned. Suppose in this hypothetical situation, I guess the expectation of my peers would be to justify myself, right? Suppose I have liberal friends and they're like, well, why is it, right? Well, why didn't you, I would justify it in such a way that, like, you didn't know all the facts, right? Like, there wasn't, like, actual facts presented at the case. And regardless of the political agenda of what you might have or might anyone have, it's the facts that sort of ultimately count. So.
Okay. You were asked a series of questions on your questionnaire about your view of both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And with respect to Black Lives Matter, you wrote somewhat favorable, and you wrote, I think the problem they're protesting against is real, but I personally don't know enough to make a completely informed endorsement. Likewise, I'm also not very invested in my opinions on the last page.
Yeah, that should be, just what I've been saying.
And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you just left that blank. Were you familiar with the term Blue Lives Matter?
Yes,
Okay. Do you have any sort of opinion as to that?
it would just be the Black Lives Matter, but the opposite. Slightly unfavorable, but I'm not very invested in that opinion either.
Okay. You were asked a series of questions regarding your opinions regarding the justice system. And one of the questions was, do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not? And you wrote, from what my peers say, no, but I don't know enough. So your peers have an opinion that the criminal justice system is somehow not operational, or it disadvantages certain people?
Right, not that it's completely inoperational, but rather that it needs reform in certain aspects.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there specific aspects that would require reform, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I don't know, but in their opinion, yeah.
And ultimately you were asked, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you checked not sure, and you wrote, scared I might make the wrong decisions. Can you explain that a little?
I mean, it is what it is. I'm just, it's a heavy burden. So it's like, if you don't make the right decision, and I know there's maybe not the right decision, but right, like, you might think about it, you know, for a long time after the trial's over, and it might have some weight. I mean, it is what it is. I'm worried that, you know, I might be maybe persuaded by a really articulate speaker who is actually clouding the truth or something like that, right? Or maybe I'm biased and, you know, I could be very well that person myself. So it's always the hesitation of, right, because it's kind of important. It's someone else's fate. So.
Okay. Fair enough. If I may have a few moments, Your Honor.
You may.
Judge, the defense will exercise a primary.
All right, juror number 60, we're going to excuse you from this panel. And so you're released from jury service generally, unless we send you a summons years from now. The deputy will collect paperwork from you on the way out, but thank you for your time. Thank you for the honest answers you've given on the questionnaire and here in court today. And best of luck. You can go with the deputy.
Thank you.
I think we'll take our afternoon break. Let's reconvene at 5 minutes after. We have one juror left.
5 minutes after, or 5 minutes of?
20 minutes, so 5 minutes after. 3:05. Thank you. Oops. Hold on, Greg. Hey, good afternoon. Sorry about that. Forgot my computer. You are juror number 62, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, well, thank you for your patience. You are the last one for the day, it appears. So there are a couple things I'm going to go over with you before I turn it over to the attorneys. The first thing of which is I'd like to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. Now, first thing, we have plexiglass between us, plexiglass in front of you. The lawyers have plexiglass in front of them. I will continue to wear my mask, but if it would be more comfortable for you, or if you think you need to take it off to speak more clearly,
Sure.
that's fine.
Okay.
Feel free to do that anytime. But if you want to keep it on, also fine. In either case, if you could approach the microphone just a little more, you don't have to be
And
right
I can
up there.
take this off too. That'd make it easier, I think.
All right. And if you want to put it back on at any time, you'll feel free. I
Okay.
kind of leave you in control of that.
Got it.
So first thing I have for you is you filled out the questionnaire, and thank you for doing that.
Yep.
Gave us a lot of good information. Obviously, you spent time on it. Is everything true on the questionnaire?
As far as I can recall, yes.
Yeah, and it's 3 months ago.
It was
so
a while ago. So
It's just that it's very common that when you filled it out 3 months ago, people reflect on it and they think, oh, I should have said this or that. And it's kind of hard, right, just cold to say what you might add. The attorneys, however, are going to ask you specific questions and maybe even read back your answer.
okay.
Feel free to add, give a different answer.
Okay.
For example, some of your opinions may have evolved, or some of the factual information you realized was incorrect. Don't worry about saying something different what's in the questionnaire.
Okay.
It's most important that we get it truly honest, candid information about you. So, any articles that you've read inadvertently since you filled out the questionnaire?
I mean, just catch a headliner here. That's you can't avoid. But other than that, no.
Right. The one danger of getting the questionnaire out too early is there's a long space of time.
Yeah.
And it has received media. This case has received media coverage, and so inadvertently,
Yes.
you get exposed to a headline, or even worse, maybe a friend talks to you and we told you don't tell anybody you're a potential juror.
Right.
So it makes it a little uncomfortable in those situations. Is there any information specifically you can tell us about that you remember from a headline or something else between when you filled out the questionnaire and today?
No, because I didn't really pay attention to it
Okay.
because I knew that I wasn't supposed to really,
Okay.
go there, so I didn't really take that second glance or deep dive into it. So I can't even really recall
Okay.
what it was about.
Anything you might have been exposed to, again, I'm sure inadvertently, that maybe isn't about the core of the case, but maybe related to it. Either other litigation, pretrial matters, the attorneys, the parties, anything like that.
No.
Okay. The most important thing is, no matter what you've heard, before the questionnaire, after the questionnaire, can you put it all aside and decide this case just on what you hear in the courtroom?
Being truthful, it would be hard.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about that, because I noticed
Yeah.
you said I would have a hard time being impartial. So
Yeah. I mean, I think there's multiple reasons.
Okay.
If I can be truthful about those. One would just be safety of my family.
Okay.
Another one would just be the safety of and the outcome. What the potential could be
Okay.
for. I mean, this is a very high profile case, and
Right.
there's a lot at stake here. And I want to be truthful to myself and not be naive with if certain outcomes were what that can mean for our country.
Right.
So I have reservations with that as well.
Okay. Let me break that down a little
Yes,
bit.
sir.
First of all, a jury is anonymous. You're not going to be on video, referred to by number.
Yeah.
But it is true that your name might be sometime after trial, not immediately after trial.
Yeah.
But sometime after trial might be public.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, is that what you're talking about as far
Yes.
as?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And in addition to that, the nature of the charge, is it the gravity of both the charge and the high-profile nature of it which causes you concern?
Well, it would just be if, I can't predict the outcome right now.
Right.
But if the outcome were to go a certain way and the general public didn't like that,
Mm-hmm.
I would that would cause definite concern for me regarding my family. Not me so much, but
Sure.
you know.
And everybody comes into this courtroom with different background and
Yeah.
different obligations.
Right.
What it comes down to is we do our best to protect the jury, but we also tell you that in the end you have to disregard
Right.
public opinion, anything like that.
Yes.
But it sounds like your view of it, which is possibly held by others, is that one verdict is a path of less resistance,
Right.
less controversial.
Yes.
And the other one may involve more controversy, more concern for your family.
Yes, sir.
Am I reading that correctly?
You are.
Do you think it's enough that with your family and yourself that you would not be impartial?
I have to be truthful, and yes, it would be hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sure you'd give it your best effort. All jurors do.
Yes.
But in the final analysis, you think the answer would be
It would be yes. I would have a hard time being impartial.
okay. To the point where one party is not going to get a fair trial, would you agree?
I mean, to be fair to everybody here,
Yeah.
I have to be truthful and say yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to excuse you from this panel then.
Okay.
You're free to go out your business. You're also excused from jury service generally.
Okay.
So you don't have to report back in or anything like that unless we give you a summons a few years from now.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
Thank you,
thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate your candor, and thank you for filling out the questionnaire
All right.
as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. It's 10 after 3. We have run out of jurors. Mr. Schaefer has sent you all an email indicating we're going to bring in 5 tomorrow morning and 4 in the afternoon. So, my only question is, and if the answer is no, I'd rather not do this off the cuff. We can do some of the motions if you'd like. But if you'd prefer, we can wait till the morning. I pretty much... Do you want to confer for a little bit?
Yes,
Okay.
Do the motions in the morning, Your Honor. I don't think Mr. Schlischer is assigned to that task in this case.
that's correct.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Do we know who's going to be arguing the motion tomorrow?
I don't.
All right. Makes sense. Let's wait till tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We'll reconvene then. We're in recess until that time. Thank you.